Hi and welcome to my channel. My name is Lynn and today I'll be crafting with the May 2022 Spellbinders Club Kits, and I want to give you a brief look at all of the cards that I'll be making in this video. If you don't have time to watch the entire video, that's completely understandable. So what I've done is I've timestamped this video, so if there is a particular card you're most interested in seeing me make, then you can hover over the timeline and jump straight to just that video. Being a flip video, I'll be making at least one flat, one layered, one interactive, and one pop-up card, and I'll be showing the cards in that order as well. So let's get started with my flat card. I will actually be making two flat cards, and both of them are going to be pretty similar to each other. They will both feature the large die of the month, which is fantastic. You get all of these words, phrases, and not only do you get the individual letters, which are what I'm placing onto this die cut, but you also get the shadow layer or the bubble sort of outline for the entire word. And so I've already die cut the shadow layer out of my black cardstock, and I'm die cutting the individual letters out of the shadow layer die cut that came out of my previous die cutting. And I'm gonna keep everything because I'm gonna use it all. What I don't use on this first card, I'll use on my next card. So I'll be making two mini slimline cards, and I cheat a little, so I make my mini slimlines at 3.5 by 5.5. That way I can actually get two card bases out of a single US letter size card or piece of cardstock. And I think typically the mini slimline is instead of 5.5, it's something closer to 6 or 6.25. But I just think this is a more efficient way to cut down a letter size sheet of cardstock. And what I'm doing is just inking directly onto my card base. And I wanted to try inking with my Nuvo hybrid ink cubes. I've collected these from card kits over the past year or so that I've been a subscriber, and it just so happened that I actually have, all the colors of the rainbow. The thing with the hybrid inks is that they are not quite a dye ink, not quite a pigment ink, and I was curious to see if I could get a smooth blend, and some of the colors worked out well. Some of them are a little bit splotchy, but I don't actually mind too much because most of this gets covered up anyhow with that black panel. And what I'm gonna mist this with is my homemade mica mist. This is just a solution of mica powder. I think the name of it happens to be Snow White, and gum arabic and distilled water. The gum arabic is a binding solution or a binding agent, and it dissolves in water. I buy it in powder form, but you can actually buy gum arabic already mixed with water and dissolved if you find that easier to use. And but that's a key ingredient to creating your homemade mist, because without a binding agent, the mica won't actually stick to the cardstock once the water dries. And so I don't know off the top of my head the ratio that I mixed gum arabic to water. It's usually when I use gum arabic, I have a 1-to-1 solution in a separate sort of eyedropper bottle. But for the spray, it's diluted more than that, because the spray, I need it to be pretty thin and watery so that it doesn't clog the nozzle of the spray. So you'll just have to kind of play with it a little bit and experiment with the ratio of gum arabic to water. But what I'm doing is inlaying the individual letters back into that negative space from which I cut the shadow layer of the happy birthday sentiment. And I love the look of this, where you can sort of see that rainbow coming through. the background. And for my second card, I'm going to do something pretty similar. I'm going to start off by inking directly onto my card base in the same similar colors, but this time using my Distress Oxides, because these Distress Oxides tend to blend much more smoothly for me. And I think part of that is because they do have a longer open time. And so it sort of sits on top of your cardstock, and you can move it around and go blend over it with multiple times if you need to get it to kind of smooth out. But I'm still going to kind of mist it with my mica mist, which, being an oxide ink, will sort of activate it a little bit, and so even if it's not the smoothest blend, it's still, that mica mist really helps to kind of cover that up. And then the bits left over from our sentiment die cutting on the first card, I'm actually going to use on this card. And I love the effect of the black being essentially an outline or the border of the sentiment, and the rainbow being the positive of the sentiment. And then the last thing I'll do is finish off both of these cards with some Nuvo drops. I like to actually make my Nuvo drops in advance on this paper release liner. And that way, if I don't get the perfect drop, it's at least, I don't have to use it. It's not directly on my project. So that finishes up my flat cards. Next, I'll move on to my layered card. And for this card, I'm going to feature the embossing folder of the month. If you haven't been subscribing, the embossing folder is relatively new. It was introduced this year. And it's a nice large one. It's 5.5 by 8.5. So this is going to be perfect for a good variety of size cards. So you could emboss panels for your slimline cards, for 5x7 cards, for smaller cards as well. So of course your US A2 size cards and mini slimlines will work just great. What I'm doing is I'm brayering on the ink. Again, I'm going for rainbow colors, and I'm using my Distress Oxides. Apologies that this is going in and out of focus because it's a clear embossing folder. It's my camera doesn't know what to focus on. So the nice thing about using a brayer to brayer on the ink is, because I'm inking on so many different colors, I can't just swipe the ink pad over it. It's because the ink pad is so much wider than what I need. The other thing that's really nice about using a brayer for this letterpressing is because the brayer is nice and flat, so it really will only catch where your embossing folder is raised. And I'm inking onto the side of the folder that has this starburst pattern that is raised, so that's going to push into my card. I gave my cardstock a light misting of just plain old distilled water, and that's going to actually serve two purposes. One, it's nice to mist your cardstock anytime you do embossing because it softens your cardstock and the paper fibers so that when you run it through, you're not going to get any cracking and you'll get a nice deep emboss. But two, because it took me a while to kind of ink on all of those different rainbow colors, that little bit of moisture on the cardstock helped to reactivate that ink so that it transferred nicely onto my panel here. And so I'm technically using the deboss side of the panel. So when I flip this over to glue it down, you'll see the emboss side where that pattern is raised, but I'm actually preferring for this card to use the deboss side where the pattern is actually pushed into the card. And the reason for that was because I wanted to have that panel be predominantly white, but still have a bit of that rainbow color. So here you can see this is the embossed side, which is gorgeous, and probably the side that you would use most often. But with any embossing folder, you do always have the option to use the deboss side if you like that look better. If I had inked on the other side, what would have happened was I would have gotten white starbursts and the rainbow patterning would be in the negative space. But I didn't want that because I wanted the solid blocks of color to come from my flowers. This is an amazing die set that released in April, so just recently. It's relatively new collection, and it's called this one is Layered Tulips. It's really fantastic because in this set you get 3 different variations on the tulip flower, and they differ in how much the flower is open. And so it's really lovely to have all of these different variations, and you could probably just mix and match and create even more shapes and variations, because at the end of the day, it's just shapes, and all of the petals are relatively the same size, so they would fit. On if you mixed and matched them, they would definitely fit. So what I did, I have another video showing this, so that's why I didn't include it here, but I actually inked up a little bit of an ombre between going from light to dark for each of the rainbow colors using the exact same distress oxides. And then I die cut my tulip petals from that. So it gives you a really nice, subtle variation in colors. And the colors are just lovely. The embossed background just adds to that little rainbow effect without taking away from it too much. And so we'll move on to my interactive cards. I actually have 2. This one's going to be a full front shaker, and it is featuring the small die of the month, which is technically a stitching die, but I'm not going to do any stitching on this card because I always feel that even though it has the designs and detailing to do the stitching, you don't necessarily have to use it that way. I think it's just another detail, another pattern that creates interest even without the stitching. And what I've done is die cut the individual letters and the flowers that do come in this set out of the new glitter foam sheets that Spellbinders released last month. And so you can actually even see in the letters hello that the stripe debossing detail of that die that actually comes through on the glitter foam. I was really surprised. I can still see it. It's sort of a nice diagonal stripe, and I was really surprised. I thought that the foam would bounce back and you would lose all of that detailing, but actually you can still see it, which is pretty cool. So I've just got my shaker pouch here, which is the size of a US A2 size card, so 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And I like making my shaker components fully enclosed like this because it's a lot easier for me to position this onto my card base with it being closed off. It uses a little bit extra acetate, but I don't mind that because it lets me sort of preview everything, and then I can get it just where I want it onto my card base. And I'm being careful to only apply adhesive behind my die cut so that you see as little of that adhesive as possible. And I just so happen to have sort of similar colors and sequins to fill. And I love full front shakers because you can fill it up with a lot of sequins, and it looks amazing. Now this card, I was really excited to create. It's actually the first one that I made because when I saw this stamp and die set, I knew I wanted to try this out. So this is the clear stamp and die set, and I'm starting off by clear stamping the sort of that octagon pinwheel sort of design, and I've white heat embossed it. And I've pulled this is an older clear stamp of the month. It was from 2021, back in, it was October, it looks like. And it has just a lot of different sentiments, but most of them are meant to stretch across a single line. There's not enough room for that. So what I'm doing is I'm inking up my stamp half at a time, essentially, so that one portion I'll stamp on one line, and then the second half I'll stamp on the second line. Now, I did heat set the octagon, but as I'm stamping out and pouring embossing powder over each of these sentiments, I'm not heat embossing as I go. I'm not heat setting as I go. Once you get the embossing powder on your Versamark ink, you don't really have to rush to heat set that. Of course, you have to be a little bit careful not to brush off your embossing powder, but I prefer to get all of my stamping and all of my embossing powder onto the card first, and then I'll heat set all of the sentiments at the same time. If you heat set one by one along the way, first, I think it will take longer, but second, you're going to run the risk of overheating the earlier parts that you heat set, because you're just going to remelt that embossing powder, and there's the potential that you'll lose some of that fine detail if it does get heated. So because this is going to be an interactive element, I've actually die cut a second piece out of 120-pound cover weight cardstock and doubled that up. And then I punched two 3/4 inch discs and glued those together as well. Now the octagon component here, this needs to be able to spin freely. So that's why I need the second little disc, and it doesn't have to be 3/4 of an inch. It just needs to be smaller than the octagon. And where you see red, that's the only place, that's that 3/4 inch disc. And that is where we will attach this unit to the card base. So if you wanted to go larger than 3/4 of an inch, you could, so that you have more that's actually going to hold this unit onto your card. But I found this worked just fine. And when you close down your brad, you don't want to smush it down super tightly, because you want that octagon piece, the blue layer with all of the sentiments, you want that to spin very freely. And so you saw that I punched a hole that the brad went through. So you want that hole to be, large enough so that the brad goes through and it spins nicely. And when you close off the tines or the legs of the brads, you don't want to pinch it down too tightly. You, again, want to give it enough space and room to move. I just freehand cut this little triangle, and I'm going to put some really pretty thick foam adhesive behind this, because it needs to overlap our spinning wheel here, and have enough clearance for that, again, to move freely and not get obstructed. And so I used, I think it's probably close to like 4 or 5 millimeter thick foam. It's pretty thick. And so I did make a bit of a error, because when I think about what I'm gonna do with these club kits, I basically have an idea in mind that is it's not completely evolved, I would say. Basically, for example, with this card, I was thinking, maybe I could make sort of like a little Wheel of Fortune wheel and have this little triangle indicator. But I don't think through all of the card composition, color scheme, or anything like that until I actually sit down to start making this. And look at this. Look how freely that spins and how fast you can get. However, check this out. When it stops, because of where I've positioned everything, the sentiment's actually upside down. So had I thought about composition and where everything was pointed, I would have stamped all of the sentiments facing the other direction. well, I didn't want to redo all of that. So basically, as quickly as I could, I lifted this up. I did get some tearing of my cardstock, so that's why I was a little bit limited in where I could reposition this wheel, because I needed to cover some of the torn cardstock because I had a little bit of tearing where this was originally glued down, and I had a little bit of tearing where my triangle piece was glued down. Thankfully, my wet adhesive hadn't dried completely. So this isn't the most ideal composition of this card, but at least now when the dial stops, you can actually read it without having to awkwardly turn your head or turn the card. So, so a little planning in advance, would have prevented some of that, but I really love how that one turned out. That might be one of my favorite cards in this series. So on to my last card, which would be my pop-up card. And you can see I've got a little bit of a theme of rainbow colors throughout all of my cards this month. But I'm starting off with, this is actually an older large die of the month. It looks like it was from 2020, September of 2020. And this one was really cool. So this is that large slice of cake where you've got these individual layers of the cake that you can die cut different words and phrases into to build up a sentiment. Super adorable. But on this card, I'm not going to use the sentiments from there, but rather I'm going to use the sentiment from the APG die of the month, which you get two. You get Hey Cookie and you get What's Bacon. So I've die cut that out and assembled my cake. And so on the front of this card, you won't see too much from the APG die of the month, but where all the fun is on the inside of the card, being that this is a pop-up card. The thing that I don't show on camera that I did do, which you'll see in the photos, is I did add, when I was all done with the card, some diamond glaze to the cherry to give it that really nice glossy shine, and it also makes it look pretty realistic too. Now, this die set is amazing. So you get this super cute oven, which you can die cut these doors into, and what's fantastic is the oven doors actually open. It's so cute. And so if you want to have this two-tone effect, you just die cut it a second time, and then you just cut along that score line to get a second little door that you can layer. And I felt as I was assembling this that like as if this was sort of like, when you build model trains and things like that, and you get to like paint all of your figurines and assemble everything. It kind of felt like that. It was so much fun to put this together because I enjoy working with all of these little die cut pieces and getting all of these layers and getting all the details in. Look, you even get the oven rack with the forced perspective, and you get the stovetop burners. There's even a separate die for the drip tray. I mean, it's amazing. And then you get these little utensils, which you can see in my little container off to the side there. And I die cut that twice again so that I can get that two-tone look. Now, let me describe the modification I made so that this can be a pop-up on the inside of your card. There is a die that will cut the side of your oven, but it's going to make a rather deep oven. So what I've done is I've cut it in two, but not directly in half. So the blue line is the original score line, one of the two original score lines that the die will put in for you. From that, I measured 1 inch and I scored a second line. That's the green line. From that, I measured another 1/4 of an inch and I cut it off there. So at the end of the day, you'll have the original 1/8 inch glue tab, that blue section on the leftmost. You'll have the 1 inch oven depth, and then you'll have a 1/4 inch glue tab on the far right. And the blue, as you can see, the blue glue tab will get glued to the front of your oven. And then the 1/4 inch glue tab will get glued to the inside of the card. So So that's basically how I've modified the side of the oven. Now, normally, if you were to create the sort of vignette, style of card with this, you would die cut 2 of those side pieces. But in this case, I just die cut the one, and I will use the other remaining piece right here to glue on the other side. So it's not going to be, exactly the same depth. I'm just using whatever was left over, but that's sufficient to get this glued down into our card. So what I like to do anytime I'm creating a pop-up is just do a little bit of a dry fitting. And so I just use my low tack tape. It's just painter's tape. And I get everything tacked down so that I can make sure that it actually works the way I think that it'll work. So on this piece, I've modified this as well. So this is going to be your stovetop. And I've cut this down to match because we have the blue line where the die puts in a score line. From that, again, I've measured 1 inch away. That's going to be the depth of the oven. And then I scored at the green line. And then I measured 3/8 of an inch away and I cut my cardstock there. And that gets me a tuck tab. That tab at the very top, that doesn't actually get glued down anywhere. That just gets tucked into the oven when you have this fully popped up. So again, the die set has dies that will cut out these pieces, and you just need to make a couple of modifications basically to reduce the depth of the oven so that when it folds down, it will still fit into because I chose to make a USA 2 size card, I'm a little bit more limited in space. So that's why I've had to make these modifications. If you were making a larger card, it's possible you could use the original depth of the oven and the original die cuts without modifications to essentially create a similar card, but with the original size of the side and the top of the oven. Okay, so then I'm gonna glue my the stove top, and so basically this is how your oven's going to look. You're gonna have the 2 sides, the front and the top, all attached the way that you see it here, and then we can start gluing it into our card. So I like to use a T-square so that it's nice and straight. The green line is the fold of my card. And then I've measured 1 inch away from that. That needs to match the depth of your oven. And that's where the blue line is. And so I'm lining up the left edge of the front of our stove with that blue line. It's essentially where the left side is attached. And the reason why I had to give myself that mark is because, as you'll remember, the left and right glue tabs, they're not the same. They don't have the same depth. So I don't want to butt that up, the edge of that glue tab up with the edge of my fold line. I just want to make sure that where this is attached, it's the same depth away from our card, so everything tucks in and pops out evenly, as you can see here. Look at that. That's so much fun. I love all the detailing here, and then once you get this popped up, you see the utensils on the side. That was a little bit of a dry fit just to make sure that the back of the oven would fit in nicely, and all I have to do is just slide this in, and that's going to be the finishing touch to this card. This was a lot of fun. This card, this one and the previous one are my 2 favorite cards. They're so much fun to put together, and you could imagine putting something in the oven to actually make it look like something is baking in the oven. You could even put there's a cookie sheet die that comes in this set. So you could, I actually thought about it, you could even put the cookie sheet maybe on top of the stove and like this, and have it even hang off the front, which would be really cute. Lots of little options there, and it all folds down nicely and folds flat and will be an easy mailer as well. So here's a final recap of all of the cards that I made in today's video. I've got my 2 flat cards featuring the large die of the month, and there are a lot of words and one huge beautiful word "you" with that lovely stitching detail. I didn't use that, but I will definitely make good use of the large die of the month, because those phrases are so versatile and easy to use. And I'm actually crossing my fingers that they'll release a full alphabet using the same font. So I showed a moment ago the layered card. Here's my full front shaker card featuring the small die of the month, and then my Wheel of Fortune card, as I'm calling it. It's so fun. And actually, one idea I had was to stamp or die cut the word happy really large, and then put all of the holidays of the year onto the wheel, and then I can write in the message, "This will be the last card I'll ever need to send you." Because they could just pull out the same card and then just spin it to whatever holiday or occasion it is. I just thought that would be really funny to do. I'll have to make that card. That's actually the first thing that came to mind. Okay, and then this is my last card, my pop-up card featuring the APG die of the month, which creates this super fantastic and really fun oven. Lots and lots of detail. And of course, you could just make this totally flat. You don't have to make it 3D, but you get all of that beautiful detailing of the stove top and all the burners and everything. You've got your utensils. I used some silver Nuvo drops on those utensils to make it seem like it's hanging on something. So really, really fun club kits this month, as always. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please consider liking, commenting, and sharing. And if you want to catch new videos as I publish them, click the subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Thanks so much. Until next time, happy crafting and have a fantastic day. Bye.